Please welcome Craig Hoy, Chairman of the Scottish Conservative Party.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, can I welcome you to Perth for the hustings, the Scottish hustings, for the Conservative leadership election. Over the last 3 weeks, the two candidates that we'll hear from this evening have been crisscrossing the country, making their pitch to be our next Prime Minister, a Prime Minister for every part of our United Kingdom. Organising 12 hustings. Organising 12 hustings at such short notice is a huge logistical exercise, and I would like to thank the teams at Scottish Conservative Central Office and CCHQ for their dedication and commitment. And I'd also like to thank Peter Booth, who's here tonight, and the National Convention for their support. But most important of all, I would like to thank you, our members, because tonight is your opportunity to pose questions to the next leader of our party. Because whoever wins this election will need our whole party to come together behind them to beat Labour and the SNP at the next general election. And that's because we know that a Conservative government acting in the national interest will always be better equipped to deal with the challenges ahead, better equipped to run Britain than Labour, better equipped to stand up for Scotland's vital place in our United Kingdom. But the challenges our country faces are great. Government, obsessed with constitutional division at any price whatsoever, rebuilding our public services after the pandemic and Russia's evil invasion of Ukraine. I believe that both of the candidates for the leadership have the potential to steer this country through these very difficult times, the potential to win that election, the potential to return our party to government for another 5-year term. But before we hear from the two candidates in the contest to become the next leader of our party, please give a very warm welcome to our Scottish Party leader, Douglas Ross.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you, members. This leadership election comes at a pivotal time for our party, but also for our country. Across the UK, people look to our party as the UK government for support and for leadership in the face of the global cost of living crisis. Yet here in Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP are once again attempting to divide our country with a second independence referendum just next year. So we all have very important choices ahead of us. And for those of us in this room, the choice we make is not just for ourselves, but for the wider country as well. The next leader of our party must redefine our Conservative beliefs and values and provide answers to the challenges our country faces. The next leader of our party must be prepared to take decisive action, the action required to help families and communities across the United Kingdom through this crisis. And the next leader of our party must govern for the whole of the United Kingdom and work to build support in all nations of the United Kingdom. And the candidate we choose as our next leader and Prime Minister must prove over the next 2 years why we deserve to win the next general election and that historic 5th term. Fortunately for us, both Liz and Rishi are up to the challenges ahead. They have shown throughout this contest that they have the vision and the ambition to take our party and our country forward. And when the contest is over and the winning candidate is announced, they will have my support and I know the support of everyone in the Scottish Conservatives to meet those challenges in the difficult times ahead. So thank you very much for joining us here in Perth today, joining us online and watching this Scottish hustings. But one other person who I know will have the full support of everyone in this room is our host this evening. So please give a very warm welcome to the STV's political editor, Colin Mackay.
Thanks, Douglas. Good evening. I am Colin Mackay from STV, home of Scotland's most watched TV news programme. And we'll have full reports on tonight's proceedings, and we'll probably speak to some of you afterwards to get it on the late news and certainly on the STV News at 6 tomorrow. We're also live streaming this on the STV News website free, so welcome to viewers there too. Because, let's face it, this is quite a scary job interview for two people tonight. 650 of you here in Perth Concert Hall, but then maybe not quite as scary as a general election, which is the way we used to get Prime Ministers. But then you're making a bit of a habit of this. I see some faces in the audience that were here 3 years ago at the leadership hustings, and you gave both the candidates quite a grilling that night, so we'll see how that goes tonight. But just let me check before we go any further. Have you all got your ballot papers here in the hall? Not with you, but have you all got your ballot papers? Yes. Have any of you not filled them in yet? Have any of you yet to vote? Oh, quite a lot of you. That's quite impressive. That's not at all what the newspapers have been reporting. So there's quite a lot of you here tonight to be convinced by either of the candidates. So let's get on with that and give you the chance to hear from the candidates. You'll hear from both sides over the next half hour. Then you'll get the chance to question them, and I will get the chance to question them. And I'll throw in a couple of questions from STV viewers as well. But first, tonight, we'll hear from Rishi Sunak and his team.
Please welcome Andrew Bowie MP.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's so good to see so many people here tonight. I am here to introduce to you our next Prime Minister. I am here to introduce to you the person I believe has what it takes, who I believe will be able to walk into number 10 Downing Street on the 6th of September and get to work, the person I trust to take the decisions necessary to tackle the challenges we as a nation face, the person who I know is ready to lead us forward to an historic 5th general election victory. And the person I know is ready to take on Nicola Sturgeon, ready to boot the SNP's politics of gripe and grievance, of division and hate that we've seen outside this hall tonight into touch. And keep our United Kingdom, our one nation, whole. Friends, I thought long and hard about who I was going to choose to be the next leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. Because honestly, we had an amazing array of talent standing to be the next Prime Minister, and it made me very proud to be a Conservative. But I have stood in 10 Downing Street. I have stood by the side of a Prime Minister when the going got tough. I've been in cabinet rooms when tough calls have had to be made, and I've seen up close the relentless pressure a Prime Minister is put under when being expected to deliver. And so for me, when it came to the crunch, when I had to choose the person I knew could do that job better than any other, there was only one, and it was Rishi Sunak. I knew this because he has already demonstrated through his actions that he has what it takes, and, crucially, that he is a unionist. He was the Chancellor that ensured that the furlough scheme, which saved 700,000 Scottish jobs, applied to the whole United Kingdom. He was the Chancellor that ensured that businesses across the whole UK would benefit from the bounce-back loans and the Eat Out to Help scheme that kept so many Scottish businesses afloat during the pandemic. He was the man that made sure the Levelling Up Fund could be accessed by Scottish local authorities, that free ports would come to Scotland, and that has led the pushback against the devolve and forget mentality that permeates Whitehall. Devolve and forget. That's the easy, lazy approach to governing that says, Scotland, pass it to Holyrood. Friends, we know what happens when that happens. We've seen it all too often before. because we've learnt, I'm afraid, we cannot trust the Scottish National Party to act in the best interests of the Scottish people, only in the interests of the SNP. Only in the interest of the two-time Vogue cover star, TV personality, Instagrammer, sometime First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, who is definitely not an attention seeker. I'll give that to Liz. She got that bit right. But you know what? We don't beat her. We don't beat the SNP. We don't win the argument. We don't ensure Scotland's place at the heart of our United Kingdom by ignoring them. Friends, I would love to ignore the SNP, usually at about 12:15 on a Wednesday afternoon in the House of Commons. And it would be all too easy for us to hit mute, I'm sure some in this hall do, to ignore them and their constant sowing of division. But if we do that, they win. We cannot. And under Rishi's leadership, we will not ignore them. We will take them on and we will win. Rishi will bring to an end the days of the SNP obscuring its failures by picking and choosing the data it publishes. Rishi will ensure Scottish civil servants will also face greater scrutiny in Westminster. Friends, Rishi will see for the first time that this failing Scottish National Party government are properly scrutinised by the UK Parliament. Friends, this country is facing historic challenges, incredible challenges, to our economy, to our very integrity. And so I am proud to stand here in front of a room of people who I've stood beside in election after election, who I know fight every single day for our party and for our country, and introduce to you a man I know has what it takes, who has what it takes to tackle those challenges, to get our economy back on a firm footing, to invest in our child's future, to lead us as we lead the world, and to keep our one nation whole with Scotland at its heart. And that man is my friend, Rishi Sunak.
My values, traditional conservative values, are clear. Hard work, patriotism, fairness, a love of family, pragmatism, but also an unshakable belief that we can build a better future.
We need a substantial and serious leader. Rishi Sunak is the real deal. And he has
record, is highly experienced.
He will deal with the threat of the SNP and the Nationalists head on, and he will unite our party and unite our country.
Please welcome Rishi Sunak.
Thanks very much. Brilliant. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. It's fantastic to be with you tonight. Now, look, I am standing here in front of you for one very simple reason, and that's because our country, our United Kingdom, did something extraordinary for my family. It welcomed them here as immigrants 60 years ago and allowed them to build a better life. Now, I was raised with a few simple values. Firstly, that family means everything to me, because we as Conservatives know the bonds of family are more important than anything any government could ever hope to replicate, and we must never forget that. Now, in my family, the thing we prioritised was hard work as the way to forge ahead. My dad was an NHS GP. My mum ran the local chemist where I grew up. And I spent all my time working in her shop, out and about, delivering prescriptions to people, and doing her books, seeing the power of that small business to provide jobs and opportunity in our local community. Now, for my parents, there was one thing that they believed above all else, could provide a better future for their 3 children. And it was simple. It was through education. And that's why today I passionately believe that the best way that we reduce inequality in society, the best way that we spread opportunity, indeed the best way that we transform people's lives, is by ensuring that the birthright of every child is a world-class education. And that, my friends, when you look at what has happened here, is a lesson that the SNP government would do well to remember. So that, in a nutshell, are my values: patriotism, family, hard work, service. And I know, looking at you, that those are your values too, and that is because they are Conservative values. And that's why I want to be your Prime Minister, to put those values into action, to build a better Britain and ensure that everyone has the same opportunities that I had. But how are we going to do that? Well, we need to do 3 things. First, we must restore trust. Then we need to rebuild the economy, and we need to reunite our country. Now, when it comes to restoring trust, for me, that starts with honesty. And as you can see in this leadership race, I have not chosen to say the things that people may want to hear. I have said the things that I believe they need to hear. Now, even though it doesn't make my life easy, it is honest, and that is what leadership is all about. But we'll also restore trust by delivering on the things that matter to people. That's why I've set out a bold plan to finally start reforming the NHS, so that we can stop talking just about how much money we're putting into it and more about the quality of the healthcare we're getting out of it. And while I'm doing that, end this devolve and forget mentality. So I will not be shy about calling out the SNP's record on things like drug and alcohol abuse, because it's not good enough and the Scottish people deserve better. It's why I want to restore trust in our rural communities by getting our trade deals right, backing food security and supporting British farming and fisheries. It's why I want to take on this lefty woke culture that seems to want to cancel our history, our values and our women. And it's why I've set out a plan to finally get to grips with illegal migration, because I stand here as a product of our country's proud and compassionate history in welcoming people to our shores. But it must be done fairly and legally. And when we turn on our TV screens and see scenes of people coming here illegally, it undermines trust in the system, and that must be fixed. And with my plan, I will fix it and take back control of our borders. Now, when it comes to rebuilding the economy, I don't need to tell all of you, you know what the challenge is. It's inflation. And we've seen this story before. Inflation is the enemy. It makes everyone poorer. It eats into people's hard-earned savings and pensions. It pushes up mortgage rates. And at a time when millions of people are anxious about the cost of living this winter, politicians should be relentlessly focused on addressing that. And I'd say that to Nicola Sturgeon, that is the priority, not another divisive, unnecessary constitutional referendum. So this winter, of course, I will provide the help, particularly to the most vulnerable in our society, cutting VAT, but going further for those groups that need it, because that is what a compassionate Conservative government must do to protect the most vulnerable. But what I will not do is pursue policies that risk making inflation far worse and last far longer, especially if those policies amount to borrowing £50 billion and putting that on the country's credit card, and then asking our kids and our grandkids to pick up the tab. Because that's not right. It's not responsible, and it is certainly not Conservative. kids to pick up the tab, because that's not right. It's not responsible, and it is certainly not conservative. Government who have chosen to not pass that tax cut on. Conservative government will always make sure that people's hard work
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think it's just because I've appeared in Vogue, the Italian edition if you're interested, that I have the pleasure of introducing Liz here in Perth tonight. Having served as Secretary of State for Scotland, I know just how important it is to have a Prime Minister dedicated to delivering for every part of our United Kingdom, no matter the challenge. And now more than ever, we need a Prime Minister who is not just an enthusiastic unionist, but a bold one too. And I am confident that that person is Liz Truss. I know how deeply and personally, from her own experience as a child of the Union, growing up in Paisley, Liz really feels that unique connection that we have across our United Kingdom, and has shown many times that she has the courage of her unionist convictions to fight that corner and, in particular, deliver for Scotland. In my time in the Cabinet, Liz was a very rare thing, an ally and advocate within the Treasury, repudiating the Treasury's devolve and forget orthodoxy. Now, as Foreign Secretary, Liz is ensuring our department has a footprint across the whole UK, with East Kilbride having a key role. And as Trade Secretary, she not only brought additional departmental resources to Scotland, but ended the longest-running trade dispute in history by securing the suspension of the Boeing Airbus tariffs. This was a boon for Scottish business, removing those tariffs on key Scottish exports like whisky and cashmere. And as Prime Minister, Liz is committed to building on that success and supporting the Scotch whisky industry to grow its global markets. But, ladies and gentlemen, as we in this auditorium know only too well, not everyone wants Scotland to succeed as part of our United Kingdom. The Scottish people voted decisively to stay part of our union. Yet those Scottish nationalists outside are still desperate to refight that referendum in a shameless excuse to get away from their appalling record of delivery. While the people of Scotland just want the constitutional wrangling to end and for both their governments to work together for their benefit. That's why we need a leader like Liz, who will say no to another independence referendum on her watch and hold the SNP to account for their failures, but who also has the steel and resolve to be able to work with Nicola Sturgeon, rising above her petty nationalist games and inevitable manufactured grievances. And Liz knows securing our union is not just about saying no to another referendum now. It's daily demonstrating those benefits of our union from Lerwick to Lockerbie. A bold unionist willing and able to take on Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP, a record of delivery for Scotland, and a Conservative agenda in Downing Street to deliver growth and prosperity to our whole country. That's why Liz Truss should be our next Prime Minister. Thank you.
The United Kingdom is a great country, and I know that a united Conservative Party can unleash the potential of all the people who make our country so great. To win the next election, we need to deliver, deliver, and deliver for the British people. I know that our country's best days lie ahead. I'm the candidate with a clear vision for the future, who can drive change and get things done. As Trade Secretary, I negotiated deals with allies like Australia and Japan, creating opportunities around the world for British business. And as Prime Minister, I will continue to deliver on the opportunities of Brexit. I will lead a government committed to core Conservative principles: low taxes, a firm grip on spending, driving growth in the economy, and giving people the opportunity to achieve anything they want to achieve, regardless of their background. I will work day and night to lead a party and a government that puts more money in your pocket and secures a better life for you and your family. I've consistently delivered when I have said I would. And I love our country. I want the best for us all, and I'm the person to deliver that.
Please welcome Liz Truss.
Hi everyone, it's fantastic to be here in Perth tonight. And I spent some of my most formative years in Scotland. I went to primary school in Paisley, the West Primary School, before I moved to Leeds in England. And I consider myself to be a child of the Union. And to me, we're not just neighbours, we're family. And I will never ever let our family be split up. I know Scotland is a great country, full of enterprise and ideas from Adam Smith to J.K. Rowling. But the fact is, Scotland has been let down by Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP government. They have been pursuing an agenda of separatism rather than dealing with the issues they created in the Scottish education system, in the NHS, and in the transport system. And I know the people of Scotland deserve better, and they want better. What they want are opportunities. What they want is a job and more opportunities in life. What they want is for their children to have a good education. In short, what they want is an aspiration nation. And that is what I will seek to deliver as your Prime Minister. And as Prime Minister, I will also have the position of Minister for the Union, because that union is critical to the success of all of us, of Scotland, of England, of Northern Ireland and Wales. It's one of the most successful unions of all time. But the fact is, my friends, we do face difficult economic times. We've got the war perpetrated by Putin, we've got an energy crisis, and we have the aftermath of COVID. And we've had several decades of low growth across the United Kingdom. So we need to do things differently. We can't just have business as usual. And I have a plan for growth for the whole United Kingdom. First of all, that's about unlocking the opportunity. Free ports here in Scotland. I will make sure that we get rid of the EU laws off our statute books by the end of 2023. So that we can do things differently. And I will get the next generation of trade deals that deliver even more for fantastic industries across Scotland, like the salmon industry, like the whisky industry, like our fantastic farmers. I'm proud that as Trade Secretary, I got the tariffs removed by the United States. And I don't think I've ever been more popular than in Mather's Bar in Edinburgh. A few nights after the tariffs had been removed, and I met some whisky distillers, and they told me what it meant for them. Because what it meant for them is more export opportunities, more ability to invest in the future, and more jobs locally. And that's what I'm about. That's what I'm about. This is why I believe we need to reverse the national insurance rise. We promised we wouldn't do it, and we are making it harder for ordinary families and ordinary businesses. We can afford not to do it. We can still pay the debt down after 3 years. I'd also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy to save people money on fuel bills. And what we need to make sure is we have this fantastic industry in Aberdeen and in the North Sea. We need to be using our gas supplies now to help people with their energy costs. And of course we need to invest in carbon capture and storage, and of course we need to invest in nuclear, and of course we need to invest in renewables, but we also need to make sure we use the gas that we have as well. And I will also keep corporation tax low. If we raise corporation tax, as is proposed, to the same level as France and 10 points higher than Ireland, it's going to be harder to attract investment into Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England. So we need to keep our taxes low, because I fundamentally believe we need to be on the side of people that do the right thing. People who set up their own businesses, people who are self-employed, families who work hard. Those are the people we support as Conservatives. And I will back our farmers, and I will back our fishermen. We produce some fantastic produce, particularly here in Scotland, whether it's Scottish lamb and beef or our fantastic seafood industry. I will make sure in 2026, when we have full control of our waters, that we are using our muscle to get the best possible deal for our fishermen. And you know that I'm tough when I negotiate with Europe. And we also need to be incredibly tough standing up to Vladimir Putin. I'm proud that we were the first European country to send weapons to Ukraine. And I, as Foreign Secretary, put the toughest package of sanctions on Russia of any country in the world. But we cannot be complacent about our security. We need to invest in defence. And that's why I would increase defence spending to 3% of GDP by the end of the decade. And I've seen the Type 26 being built and governed. And I want to see more of our successful defence industry here in Scotland succeed. And I will make that happen. And I will also make sure we protect and renew our independent nuclear deterrent. I will also deal with the problem of migration and illegal migration and the appalling people trafficking we're seeing over the Channel. We need to not just implement the Rwanda scheme, but we need to extend it to more countries. And I will legislate in British law to make sure we can't be overruled by the ECHR. But as well as protecting freedom and democracy overseas, we also need to make sure we protect free speech and freedom here in the United Kingdom. I don't have any truck with the identity politics of the left. I believe that people should be valued on the basis of their character, on their talent and their hard work, not their external characteristics. And I also believe, and I'm free to say, that a woman is a woman. And I will make sure we protect our single-sex spaces, including our domestic violence shelters. And I will also stand up for the United Kingdom. There are too many people who try and talk our country down, who say the best days are behind us, who are trying to split our country up. Those people are wrong. We're a great country. I know, travelling the world as Foreign Secretary, that people have huge respect for the United Kingdom. They share our values of freedom and democracy. And we need to be more proud of that here at home. And we need to be proud to be Conservatives. The reason reason people voted for our fantastic MSPs and our fantastic MPs here in Scotland and right across the United Kingdom is they believe in our values. A belief in enterprise, personal responsibility, hard work, freedom to choose. Those are the things that we should deliver. And we've got to deliver. We made massive promises in 2019, and we have to deliver them. And I'm somebody who doesn't take no for an answer. I do get things done. I push things through, whether it's the trade deals that people said couldn't be negotiated, whether it's getting the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill through Whitehall and into Parliament. I get things done and I deliver. And I will deliver for Scotland and I will deliver for the United Kingdom. And I will make sure that in 2024 we defeat the SNP and we defeat the Labour Party and we win the next general election. But most of all, I will make sure that now and forever, our fantastic union goes from strength to strength to strength. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, that was your chance to hear directly from both candidates. In a few minutes, you'll get the chance to directly question both candidates, which I've got to say, when they're going to be, one of them is going to be Prime Minister, is probably much more exciting than just listening to what they've got to tell you. But first of all, I'm going to get the chance to question Rishi Sunak. Please welcome him back on stage.
Hi, Colin.
Mr Sunak, well, let's start with the cost of living crisis. How could we start anywhere else? Labour wants to freeze the energy cap for the next 6 months. Scottish Power has suggested freezing it for the next 2 years. You're going to have to do something like that if you win, aren't you?
So I don't think that's the right approach, Colin, but I do completely agree that it is the most important issue facing all of us in Scotland and across the United Kingdom, because the anxiety that millions are feeling right now about what's going to happen to their energy bills in autumn is the issue that politicians should be focused on
and you've done
addressing.
Nothing to ease it during this leadership contest.
Well, actually, I announced many things as Chancellor previously.
You've done nothing to ease it during this leadership contest when you've had Labour yesterday and you've had Scottish Power and you're doing nothing. Basically, if you don't freeze the energy cap, you're going to freeze the poor.
So, Colin, what we're talking about is what's going to happen to bills in October, right? Which we don't actually know yet because that won't get announced for another few weeks. So what I would do is cut VAT off energy bills for everyone. That will come on top of the support I announced as Chancellor that's worth around £1,200 for the most vulnerable families. But I would go further than that because I think there are two groups of people who will need extra help come the winter, and that's people on particularly low incomes and people like pensioners. Those two categories of people are ones where, as Chancellor, I announced further support. I would make sure we go further if I was Prime Minister. And the reason is simple. It's because through no fault of their own, because we are at war with Russia, with sanctions, the West has decided rightly to stand up to that aggression. People are having to pay for higher energy bills, and it's right that the government helps those who most need our help. And I think the right way to do that is with direct support. I do not believe, and this is an important point of difference between me and Liz in this contest, I don't think tax cuts are the right way to do that. Now, the tax cuts that Liz are proposing is worth about £1,700 to someone on her income. For someone working very hard on the national living wage, it's worth about £1 a week. And for a pensioner not working, it's worth precisely £0. Now, I think if that's the policy that the government adopted, millions of people are at the risk of being tipped into destitution. I think it would be a moral failure, and I don't think the British people would ever forgive us. And as Prime Minister, I would not let that happen at all.
Just let me check. Just to clarify, are you absolutely ruling out freezing the price cap?
Yes, I don't think that's
Absolutely
the right approach.
ruling it out.
The right
Labour,
approach is
all the other parties, the
Yeah,
Scottish Power and the energy bosses who were in Downing Street last week, they've got it wrong.
Well, I don't think we need to necessarily list this. The energy companies are going to do what's in the energy companies' interests. Our job is to look out for people who actually need our help.
So no energy, yeah, but they're also frustrated by the lack of effort and lack of work from your government, or the government that you were part of just up until a few months ago. But you're not going to have...
So, Colin, we're here to talk... You're ruling out to answer your questions.
Yeah,
we're here to talk about what we will do.
You're ruling out an energy price cap, or freezing the energy price cap. What about for small businesses? Because they're struggling just now as well.
Yeah, so
what are you going to do for them?
Well, actually, the things that I have done this year are making a difference, because Scotland particularly has a very large hospitality sector. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. And the most important way to support that industry, the tax cut that they always ask me about, was business rates. And that's why we cut business rates by 50% this year. That money was also given to the, and given to the Scottish Government to also do the same. But also the employment allowance. And that's a £1,000 tax cut for small businesses to help with their employment bills this year. That's something I did as Chancellor. I grew up in a small business. I talked about my mum's pharmacy. I understand the pressure that small businesses are under, and that's why I make sure that we will always support them. That's what we do as a party. We are the party of small business.
You used the word destitution just a moment ago. That's a word that in the last few weeks has been used by Gordon Brown and Nicola Sturgeon. You're sounding more like the opposition than somebody who wants to lead the government.
Well, I'm sounding like someone who wants to be Prime Minister at a time when millions of people are going to see their energy bills going up by £1,500. I think it's the right thing to do for a Prime Minister in those circumstances, to have a plan to address it and start by being honest about the scale of the challenge we face. Not acknowledging it is not leadership.
Now, last week you said... Last week at the hustings in Darlington, you said that NHS spending was fine and what we needed was reform and efficiency. How much of a pay rise would you give nurses?
Well, actually, that's a devolved matter here. In England, we listen to the recommendations.
How much do you think they're worth?
Well, actually, if you let me finish the question, we have a well-established process.
Absolutely. But how much do you, if you were going to be Prime Minister, how much do you think they're worth?
I would listen to the review of the independent body, and the independent body has made a recommendation, and we would do it. But look, let me just talk about this, right? So let's talk about it, because the NHS is incredibly important. And, you know, I want to cut people's taxes, and the only way we're going to be able to do that sustainably and responsibly is if we are able to get a grip of NHS spending and focus finally on reform and efficiency of the NHS. And that's what I want to deliver.
Our nurses are only worth more than 5%, which is what we've rejected so far.
Let's talk about how do we do that? Because that's the important question, right? If everyone who wants to have lower taxes, they've got to think, well, how can we get more efficiency out of the biggest area of government spending? So I have a plan to give you some sense of the things I want to do, because I want to be bold and radical about this, Colin, and I hope this is something that the Scottish Government will look at copying. Now, I want to tackle an issue that we all known about for years, but we haven't done anything about, and that is the issue of missed NHS appointments, right? Because for so long, last year, 15 million appointments were missed in the NHS, right? Not just at GPs, but at hospitals too, and that's not right. It doesn't value our doctors and our nurses, and it deprives people of the care that they desperately need. So I want to get tough on that. And this is not about making money from charging for missed appointments. It's about changing behaviour in our country, so that
again,
is not acceptable.
It's something that's devolved, and the Scottish Government have already ruled something like that out.
Well, they shouldn't. Because if you can get people to cancel appointments in advance, what do? We create lots more healthcare, people get treated quicker, the backlogs come down faster, and not a single person has had to penny more in taxes. That is a Conservative approach to reforming the NHS and keeping people's taxes low.
Nurses are threatening to go on strike. Nurses are threatening to go on strike across the UK because you're not giving them a big enough pay rise. Do you think they're worth more than 5%?
I think we have an independent process.
We have an independent process
that reconciles.
That, then. You're not going to get involved. Even if nurses go on strike, you wouldn't get involved.
I'm going to carry on with the government's policy, which is to accept the recommendations of an independent process that is there for a reason.
I've got a question from an STV viewer now. Janice Boyd from Glasgow asks if you would be prepared to live in a socially rented property on minimum wage for a week so you can relate to the average UK citizen.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'd say to Janet, look, I know things are difficult right now for many people. I think the most important thing is to help them with their energy bills, and I've got a plan to do that, and particularly focused on the most vulnerable. That's what I did as Chancellor. But when our country was plunged into an unbelievably difficult situation a couple of years ago, when businesses and millions of families were watching a TV screen and not knowing what was about to happen to them, their livelihoods, their future, I stood up and made sure that I protected them, their families, their jobs, their businesses. I did it in record time, and I did it successfully. Those are my values, and that's my track record. I'm proud of it, and I would do exactly the same as Prime Minister.
Would you ever allow another independence referendum?
Look, as I said earlier on, at a time when, look, we've just spent 10 minutes talking about the most important issue, which is the cost of living, about the anxiety that people like Janet and others...
So talk about independence. You're in Scotland. Would you ever allow another independence referendum?
It'd be great if I could just answer the question, Colin, that you posed. That'd be marvellous. Thank you very much.
It'd be great if you did.
You rightly have focused on the cost of living, and that's because that is the most important thing. And I tell you what, like, it is quite frankly balmy for politicians to be trying to focus on a divisive and unnecessary constitutional referendum at a time where people are worried about heating their homes. It's completely balmy.
I'll go back to the question then. Would you ever allow another independence referendum?
Look, of course, the union, I mean, I can't imagine the circumstances in which I would. Like, we live in a union which is, of course, there by consent and by democracy, and I accept that. But I just don't think that anybody thinks that now or any time in the near future is remotely the time to focus on this. And that's not something that I'm focused on doing. I'm focused on defending the union. I'm focused on demonstrating the benefit of the union to people in Scotland. I'm focused on holding the SNP to account for the failures they have. That's what we should be doing.
Can there ever be another independence referendum?
Look, again, this is not the thing that we need to talk about.
That's the thing I'm asking you.
Yeah, well, it's the thing that I'm not going to be focused on as Prime Minister.
Maybe people in the hall agree with you. There's a lot of people in Scotland who won't agree with you.
Well, actually, I think everyone in Scotland will agree that right now the priority is focused. What people in Scotland want is they want to see their governments, Scottish and UK government, working together. Right? They want to see them working together on their priorities. Right? So that's what they want to see. They want to see. They want to see. Actually, they want to. Yeah, well, they want to see. Look,
let's talk about that in Freeport.
Right. They want to see. Like, Douglas is right, because Douglas has been highlighting their failures to tackle drug and alcohol abuse, and he's got a good plan to sort that out. Alistair has been there making sure that we deliver Freeport, a policy I came up with in Scotland. Right. That's the kind of thing that we should be doing, and that's what we will do if I'm Prime Minister.
On Freeports, didn't you block the Acorn carbon capture project when you were Chancellor?
No, I funded carbon capture and storage with £1 billion.
In Teesside, but not in Scotland?
No, I funded it overall for the United Kingdom.
But it's not happening in the North East.
Sorry?
It's not happening in the North East just now. It could if there was a Freeport there. Do you back that? Would you back the Acorn project now?
Not only do we back one Freeport, thanks to Alistair and working together with me, we backed 2 Freeports for Scotland.
And would you back the carbon capture project in Peterhead now?
So there is an Acorn cluster which is on the reserve list for the carbon capture and storage trade. I've put £1 billion in as Chancellor. I'm always happy to look at what we're doing to support the Scottish economy, because it's important that we do. Freeports are one example, but making sure that we grow our financial services industry here is another great example, right? With my background, I want to reform all the laws that we have to make sure that we can keep our financial services industry incredibly competitive. It's one of Scotland's economic powerhouses. It's something we can be enormously proud about in the UK. And it's another industry alongside our fantastic energy industry in Scotland, which I was proud to champion as Chancellor, because, again, it's something the SNP government ignore.
Very briefly.
I mean, we're going to get to net zero in 2050, but between now and then, we do need to use the gas that we have here at home, and that's something that I fully support.
Very briefly, Ruth Davidson's backing you, but she doesn't think you've got a chance of winning. Do you still think you have? Because you've already lost supporters.
So, Colin,
some of them think you have, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I'm, as you can see, I'm out fighting for the things that I believe are right for our country. I'm fighting for things that I passionately believe in, and I'm going to give it everything I've got till the last day of this contest. Simple as that.
Let's open it up now to the audience. Right. Now, there are people with white hoodies who have microphones. If you can wait till the microphones come towards you, and Rishi Sunak will take your questions. I'm going to start off maybe taking a couple at a time. So we'll take hands up if you've got a question. Right, there's a question from a lady there with grey hair and glasses. And okay, it's platinum hair. Sorry, it's platinum. And I'm looking for a question over there as well. Lady in the stripy top, we'll take you second. So we'll take you first, OK?
Thank you. I'm Ros McCall, the Conservative Women's Organisation chair in Scotland. To be the party of diversity, never more so than during this leadership race. But more still needs to be done. Our party is seen by the public in a certain way. So how will you combat that perception and use your skills to present the new face of conservatism in Scotland?
Mr Sunak.
Well, as you said brilliantly, this leadership contest has highlighted the diversity in our party. And whatever happens at the end of this leadership contest, we're going to either have our third female Prime Minister or our second ethnic minority Prime Minister. And it was the Conservative Party that did that, right? So that's something for us to celebrate. But look, when it comes to how do we appeal, I think actually, if you think about all the research on people in the middle, swing voters, and broadening our appeal, by definition, they're not ideological because they're swing voters, right? They're not naturally Tories, they're not naturally Labour people. And what they want, well, above anything else, is a government that works. A government that is conducted seriously, that is conducted competently, and is conducted with decency and integrity at the heart of everything that it does. That is the change that I'm going to bring, and that's how we'll appeal to everyone.
OK, lady in the stripy top. Hang on, the microphone's there.
When you're Prime Minister, and note when, will you rethink your plan to send the wretched illegal immigrants to Rwanda? It is inhuman, it's inhumane, and instead will you negotiate with the French to tackle the problem where it really begins, and that's with the illegal traffickers?
Well, so with the greatest respect, I'm going to have to say I disagree with you. And the reason for that is simple. So look, I said this is really important. Look, I said earlier, look, I stand here as a representation of our country's unbelievable compassion in welcoming people to our shores. Whether it's most recently with Ukraine, but before that with Hong Kong, Syria, Afghanistan, my family, we have always done that, and we will continue to always be that beacon of hope for people around the world. But it must be done fairly, it must be done legally. And making the Rwanda policy work is an important part of getting a grip of this situation. But it's not the only thing we need to do. I'll tell you a couple of things we need to do to make sure that we can do this. We need to, I think, move away from the ECHR definition of asylum because it is too broad and it allows many people to be here who shouldn't be.
BBC reporting tonight that the government were warned that Rwanda would kill political opponents before you agreed to send them. Did you know that?
No, the United Nations used Rwanda as a place to take refugees in previous crises.
Coming from a government advisory. Did you know that?
The United Nations believed that Rwanda was fine, so I do think that it's fine to do it.
So you weren't aware of that, though?
So I was actually aware that United Nations have used Rwanda specifically as a refugee and asylum centre in previous crises because they believe that it is a safe place.
Okay. Lady up the back.
Hi. Talking of the United Nations, I don't mind you scrapping the Human Rights Act as it is now. Will you fully incorporate the United Nations Convention on Persons with Disabilities into UK law?
Well, Madam, I can't say 100% yes because I don't know exactly what's contained in it, but what I can tell you is that making sure that we have a country, a society, economy that is supportive of those with disabilities is incredibly important to me. And I'll just give you one example of something that I did as a junior minister to give you a sense. Now, I had no idea until I met families who were grappling with this, that those who are living with complex disabilities in our society, 250,000 of them, for those people, a typical disabled toilet is simply not sufficient because they have to use changing benches and hoists to help their children. And because we didn't have enough provision of those, they were forced to do things that are incredibly undignified, change their children on the side of roads and service stations on the floor, dirty as it would be in shops, and were not able to have the day out that many families would all take for granted. And they came to see me in my surgery as a backbench MP, and they said, you know, we need you to help with disabled toilets. And I said, what? I thought disabled toilets, we have them everywhere. And they explained this thing, which I was not aware of. And then as local government minister, when I turned out, it was my first job, and it turned out that building regulations were my responsibility. And what I managed to do was change our law so that when new buildings are built and when large ones are retrofitted, they would make provision for changing places toilets in all of them. But I also found some efficiencies in some other budgets, which I then later added to as Chancellor, to massively increase the provision of changing places toilets across the country, because I want every family to have the dignity and the ability to have a day out with their children, and that will give you some sense. I think this is very important.
Gentleman in the blue shirt.
First of all, can I say very warm welcome to Scotland. Thank you for coming, and in whatever capacity, I hope we'll see an awful lot more of you. But one simple question that requires a short answer. Will you, within your first 100 days in office, signal the intention to pass legislation that will make it illegal for the SNP government here to spend money that is beyond their area of devolved powers, the penalty for which would be personal liability?
I see Alistair and Douglas are chuckling away at the front here. So, look, I mean, I'm happy to go and take a look at that and figure out what the right way to do it is. But your broader point is one I completely agree with. And it's about making sure that there is proper accountability and scrutiny of what the SNP government is doing. Now, I started to work on this as Chancellor, and we need to do more, because simply the mentality in Whitehall over the past decade has been devolve and forget. And it was a great privilege to work with both Douglas and Alistair, actually, and our other colleagues on this, to just lean against that. And it requires ministers to be brave, because the civil service will always want to just devolve and forget. We have to make choices to do things differently, which is what we did with free ports, with the Levelling Up Fund and other things, to directly do things in Scotland. But holding account requires some very practical steps. And that's why I've announced today that I want to take forward some policies that I think will make an enormous difference to our ability to hold them to account. I want Scottish officials to be able to come to Westminster Parliament to face questions in the same way that UK ministers have to do in Scotland. That's right, and it's fair. And crucially, because it's something that we've grappled with for so long, I do want to pass a law, if required, to ensure that the SNP Scottish Government has to produce data about public services in a directly comparable way, in the same way that we do it across the United Kingdom. Because unless we have that, we can't do it.
Man right at the back.
Hi there, Rishi. Big fan of what you're doing, big supporter. Up here.
Oh, where are you?
Up here.
Oh, right, got you. Right.
Hi,
Fantastic.
big supporter of what you're doing, what you have done in the past as well. I look after, as an accountant, a lot of businesses in the local area, particularly in the hospitality sector. We want to know, what can you do to help the still struggling hospitality sector, particularly with VAT and with corporation tax, and also what can be done to help even bigger businesses or businesses in other sectors with the problems they may have with corporation tax as well, as they still recover from what COVID did to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, look, the hospitality industry is something that matters enormously to me, and that's why during the pandemic you saw me act time and time again to support it. And it's not just because I like eating out or going to the pub, it's because that industry employs 2 million people across our United Kingdom, and typically those people are younger, they're on lower wages, they're coming off unemployment. So as a matter of social justice, it's an industry that deserves our support. Now, many of the, other than VAT, which you mentioned, many of the other direct levers are devolved, which is frustrating. So whether it's business rates for the hospitality industry, whether it's planning reform for our high streets, those things, unfortunately, are not within my purview. But what I am doing is reforming alcohol duties, taking advantage of our Brexit freedoms so that next year, for the first time, we will have a far cheaper rate of beer duty in our pubs than we do in our supermarkets, so we can support that great British institution and support our hospitality industry that way. But could I answer your question on corporation tax, because it's really important? Because many of you will have heard that I want to put up corporation tax, and you'll be sitting there thinking, hang on, we thought this guy was meant to be a Tory. Why is he doing that? And so let me explain what we're doing. So corporation tax is going to go up next spring as part of paying back some of the things that we had to do during COVID, and I think it's entirely reasonable that businesses take some of the load there. But there are three things I want you to remember. Firstly, the rate that the corporation tax is going up to is the lowest in the G7, the group of large economies that we compete with, like America, Canada, France, Italy, Germany. If you look at the 20 largest economies that we compete with, we'll still have the fourth lowest rate. Right? So this is an internationally very low rate still. Second thing you need to remember is that it only applies to the biggest businesses. 70% of UK registered companies will not see an increase in their rate. They'll have a small business rate and they will continue to pay the same as they're paying now. And the third and most important thing for you to know is that it's going to be combined with significant new tax cuts for businesses that are actually investing in things and growing, and businesses that are innovating with R&D to create the products and services of the future. That's how you drive growth in a modern economy, and those bits of our tax system are very ungenerous compared to all our international competitors, and it explains a large part of our lower productivity in this country. I have spent an enormous amount of time thinking about this, analysing it, talking to businesses, and based on all my own personal experience in business, in finance, and as Chancellor, I am 100% convinced that my corporate tax plan is the right one for the United Kingdom, because it will actually drive growth and investment and increase productivity and create jobs. Liz's plan is the wrong one, sticking with the failed experiment of the last 10 years, whereas investment today, in spite of this low corporation tax we've had, investment today is no higher than it was a decade ago. It just hasn't worked. So instead, we need to cut business taxes on the specific things that actually make a difference to our lives, the things that will create jobs and productivity, and that is the tax system that I'm going to deliver for you, and trust me, it will be a better one for the United Kingdom.
Young person down here.
The issue of trust and confidence in politicians of all parties appears to be at an all-time low, particularly among young people. How would you start to rebuild this trust and confidence?
It's a very good question. Very similar to the lady next to you who asked earlier. And I think it's broadly the same answer, to be honest. But I think there are some practical things we can do very quickly, right? The first thing is to restore the independent advisor on ministerial standards and ethics. It's wrong that there isn't one, and I want to reappoint that person, give them the powers and the resources they need to hold everyone to account, because no one should be above the rules, no one should be above the standards we expect of them. I think the second thing is it starts with honesty, and as you can see in this election, I want to be honest with the country about the challenges we face. You can't restore trust if you're selling people a false promise, and I don't want to do that. And then the third thing, to go back to what I said to your neighbour's answer, is to make sure that the government is run with integrity at the heart of everything it does, and that needs to be set by the person at the top. It's as simple as that, and if we can do that, then we can definitely restore trust, and we can appeal to a whole new generation of voters too.
Are you saying it hasn't been run with integrity?
That's why I resigned from the government, yes.
But it took quite a long time, didn't it? Okay. We're going to try and squeeze in a couple of questions. This lady here, and then a man in the pink tie there.
Good evening, Mr. Sunak. I would like to ask, you mentioned accountability, and I think there's a general belief in Scotland that money sent from Westminster does not go where it should go. Have you plans to investigate where that money is right now?
Yes. Yeah. No, and you're absolutely right. And I tell you, I tell you why this was so frustrating to me, because in the middle of the pandemic, or whenever I would be engaging with Scottish media or on the various civil society, the amount of people that seemed to think furlough had come from Nicola Sturgeon, right? So it just tells you what a job we have to do. And that's why some of the practical things that I talked about earlier are so important for us to be able to follow the money. But you saw it for the first time recently, because we finally had a chance to really go at it. Because I did a spending review for the UK, which sent £4.5 billion a year of Barnett to the Scottish government. And then Kate Forbes finally stood up and did her spending review. So we were actually able to see the choices they made. Now, in contrast to what we were doing elsewhere, public spending on the NHS in Scotland is growing at a far slower rate than what it is in England. Then look at the rest of the public sector. Agriculture, education, justice, local government. She's imposed austerity on all those parts of public services. And yes, I have put an income tax cut in. And that's in, and I'd given the Scottish Government money to pass that income tax cut on. They chose not to do that. So you might scratch your head and say, hang on, well, where's all this money going then? So they're not giving it to the NHS, they're in austerity everywhere else, they're not giving the income tax cut. We found out where it's going. You know where it's going? The welfare budget in Scotland is increasing by 50% over the next 5 years, right? That is wrong, right? And we have got to be able to make that argument. We are a party that believes in people working hard, and we want that hard work to be rewarded. That's where the priority should be. It should be on cutting people's taxes, not putting more money into the welfare system, and we have got to make that argument, and that's one of the ways that we're going to beat Nicola Sturgeon, because our values are the right values, and they're the values of the majority of people in our country.
One thing. But just on that, you would bypass the Scottish Government with some spending, would you? I'm going to go to him, but would you bypass the Scottish Government with some spending?
We already have started that, and we'll do more of it.
How much? How much?
Well, I want to find all the opportunities that we can to do what we've started. So whether it's with the Levelling Up Fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund, whether it's with now Freeport, so there is an ability for us to demonstrate directly to communities in Scotland the value of the UK government. Because Nicola Sturgeon says she believes in devolution, but she doesn't really. Devolution to her just means powers to her. Real devolution.
Final question to you from this gentleman here.
Because as we know, real devolution is down to the communities and councils in Scotland. That's what we're going to deliver.
Gentleman here.
Mr. Sunak, thank you very much for coming to Perth. It's lovely to be able to speak to you today.
Thank you for having me.
And it would be even better to see you, number 10, as a man with proper family values and trying to keep it a bit, the traditional family. But my question is about the NHS. As someone who has actually had their life saved by the NHS, who's been, I was declared dead at one point, but I was brought back to life. I cannot speak more highly enough about what is probably one of the greatest assets that this country has to offer. If you win and enter number 10 and get in charge of this country, how soon will you start reform and start bringing down waiting times and making the NHS run more efficiently without compromising on the health of patients, particularly that of patients with mental health issues?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so happy to hear that you recovered properly, and that is a fantastic success story, because the NHS, when it works well, is extraordinary, right? And that's why it's important that we as a party must be trusted with it, because we're not going to be able to win elections if the public don't trust us on their #1 public service priority, because your story is replicated a millionfold across the country, and that's why we need to make sure we're trusted with it. Now, I can be trusted with it. I grew up in an NHS family, right? I talked about my mum and my dad, and then as Chancellor, I did something incredibly difficult. Right? Something that many of you probably don't actually love, and that's because I created a brand new health and social care levy to make sure that we put extra funding in at a time of enormous strain for the NHS because of the backlogs and to grip social care once and for all. Now, I did that, by the way, on a UK-wide basis. I did it on a UK-wide basis deliberately because the National Health Service is a national service. The clue is in the name. And we must never let the SNP try and make that anything less than it is. It is a unifying institution that everyone in the United Kingdom feels proud about. And I will make sure as United Kingdom Prime Minister that I'm supporting the NHS in all parts of the UK and ensuring that people everywhere, especially in Scotland, get the care that they need. And that's why I will not be shy about holding the SNP to account for not delivering the things that they should, because healthcare is vital, they've been given the money to do it, and now they've got to get on and deliver it, and we will make sure that they do.
I'm afraid our time is up. We'll come back with more questions for Liz Truss, but please show your appreciation for Mr. Sunak. trying to get as many questions as we can in from the audience. We're already doing better than the other hustings have done in terms of getting questions in, so we'll do the same when we come to Liz Truss, who's about to join me on stage now. Please have a seat. And you. I'm going to start where I started with Rishi Sunak, because it is the obvious place to begin. 3/4 of Conservative supporters backed Labour's plans on energy costs, according to a poll in the Times yesterday. You're being left behind on this, aren't you?
Well, first of all, I think we need to reduce taxes, because it's important people are able to keep more of their own money. And what I think is wrong is the idea we take money from people in taxes and then give it back to them in benefits. So what I would do is reverse the national insurance increase, but also have a temporary moratorium on the green energy levy. The next thing we should do is look at supply. And I was in Aberdeen earlier today. You know, we have a fantastic oil and gas industry in the northeast of Scotland, and we should be making sure we're using those resources to help our domestic gas supply at this very difficult time when people's energy bills are highest. And that should be the best way of fixing this problem, because what I worry about is putting a sticking plaster on this problem, saying, yes, we will find this extra money, and then being in the same position in 6 months' time. And what we need to do is make sure we're using those resources, making sure we're investing in nuclear, we're investing in renewables, so we have a long-term solution to this problem, because I'm afraid, Colin, this problem isn't going to go away in 6 months' time. The appalling fact is that Vladimir Putin continues to perpetrate this war in Ukraine. Of course I want to end it as soon as possible. Of course I want to give the Ukrainians all the support we can. But what is not right is simply to throw money at the problem without dealing with the root cause.
But if as that poll suggests, your own party's supporters think that the energy price cap, extending that is a good idea, is that not something you should at least be considering?
Well, what people are concerned about, and I totally get this, is energy bills. And this is a problem for consumers, but it's also a problem for businesses. The whiskey distillery I was at this morning was telling me about their very high energy bills. So, of course, I understand people's concerns. And that's what being reflected. Well, what I'm saying is, what we need to do is deal with the supply issue. That is the important issue we've got to deal with now. The fact is we didn't invest in nuclear early enough. We haven't done enough to use the resources in the North Sea and make sure the right incentives are in place, and we need to get on with that now. But of course, I completely understand people are concerned and people are struggling. This is why I think it's the wrong time to put up taxes. It's also the wrong time to put up taxes on business, because we need businesses to invest. We need businesses to invest in new solutions to deal with this.
They can't do that if they're struggling to pay their energy costs. What help can you give businesses, particularly small and medium businesses in Scotland and across the UK?
Well, first of all, not raising corporation tax and reversing the national insurance increase will help businesses. And it will also help investment. And what I want to do is make sure we're unleashing all the potential investment in our economy. At the moment, there are some stringent EU rules in place that we haven't got off our statute books that are stopping that investment taking place. So business investment is very important. Keeping taxes low is important. Fixing the supply issue is important as well. But simply saying every problem, the answer is to tax more and spend more government money, that is not going to resolve the underlying issue here.
STV viewer Tommy Roger from Port Glasgow asks how your tax cuts will help low-income families who are below the tax threshold.
Well, they will help everybody, because a growing economy means more jobs, more opportunities and more growth. And currently, this country is forecast to go into recession. And we need to avoid that, because I know how difficult a recession is. I grew up, and I said this earlier, in Paisley in the 1980s and Leeds in the 1990s. I know what difficult economic times look like, and we do not want that for people. This is why it's important that we get investment, that we get businesses successful, that we get economic growth, so we avoid those consequences for all families. So the idea...
help them with their energy bills?
Well, I've already said that I'll have a temporary moratorium on the green levy, which will cut energy bills for anything. What I'm not going to do, Colin, here is write the next Chancellor's budget when we're still in the middle of this leadership election. You know, that is something I can't do. That is something I can't do. But what I can say is my first priority is making sure the economy grows so that we can support everybody, regardless of how well off they are. The second priority is dealing with the energy supply issue, which is a growing and pressing issue, and we need to sort it out for the long term. We can't just have a 6-month sticking plaster. And of course, you know, I would make sure, if I was Prime Minister, that we help people as much as we are able to help them. But what isn't right is simply, well, as I've already said, I cannot write a future budget.
But you're going to choose the next Chancellor if you're Prime Minister, so you can tell them what you want that to be, can't you? Otherwise, you're saying, vote for me and see what you get.
I can assure you that that is not the way my government would work. In that I believe...
You would have no influence on that budget at all. You would have no influence on your own emergency budget.
What I believe is appointing competent people to do the job who get the job done. I don't believe in a presidential number 10 where the Prime Minister... Of course. Colin, I've been very clear about my strategy, which is first of all keeping taxes low and getting growth going. Secondly, dealing with the supply issue. And thirdly, looking at, you know, what else we can do. But you know, I cannot lay that out at this stage. You know, I'm Foreign Secretary at the moment. I'm not in charge of the Treasury or the Business Department, and we currently already have a Chancellor and a Prime Minister carrying out those roles. What I have set out, and I think I've been pretty clear, is the principles under which my government would operate and the principles under which I would expect my Chancellor to operate. But I can't lay out a full budget, much as I know it would be great news for STV if you were able to...
your voters might like to know as well.
Get an exclusive.
I think a lot of people would quite like to know what your plans are. But The Guardian has unearthed quotes from you when you were Chief Secretary of the Treasury in 2019 tonight, saying that what we need from workers is more graft. Do you stand by that now?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you're quoting there, but the point that I've always made is what we need in this country is more productivity across the country, and we need more economic growth. And the thing that we don't have enough of, is capital investment. And that is why it's so important that we get businesses investing, whether it's in the oil and gas industry, whether it's in the whiskey industry, because that will... We haven't done enough, to be frank. And I have been openly critical of some of our economic policies, including the national insurance rise. And even if these policies were okay for normal times, the fact is we're not in normal times. We're in extraordinary times, and we need to be bold, and we need to do things differently. And that's what I believe people voted for in 2019. They wanted us to unleash opportunities across the United Kingdom, and that is what I would be determined to do as Prime Minister.
You described yourself as a child of the Union. You grew up in Paisley. I've got my Paisley pattern tie on just to say
that for me?
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I'm pleased
but
to
you've
see
lost
your
your
bias,
accent.
Colin.
You've lost your accent.
I have.
Did you ever have a Scottish accent?
I had a very Scottish accent.
Go on, give us a bit.
No, I'm not.
Oh, go on.
I am not. Look,
it might endear you to your electorate.
No, I want these people to vote for me. So I think doing a cod Scottish accent is not going to work. But when I moved from Paisley to Leeds when I was 11, and I had a very strong Paisley accent at the time.
You said...
And I routinely got the mick taken out of me.
You said earlier that you'll never let our family talking about the UK be split up. Are you saying not now or not ever to another independence referendum?
If I am elected as Prime Minister, I will not allow another independence referendum. I mean, this is... We had a referendum in 2014. It was once in a generation. Once in a generation is not up in 2022.
But since then, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, which wasn't any government's fault.
I'm coming to that.
We're about to be in our fourth Prime Minister. for a lot of people beyond this hall, it feels like a generation. What's the timescale then? Is there a democratic route for Scotland to decide that it wants to change its future?
Look, it was
Is there a
agreed
democratic route?
at the time of the 2014 referendum. It was agreed by the SNP that it was a once-in-a-generation referendum. And Colin, I believe in politicians keeping their promises, and Nicola Sturgeon should keep her promise.
In Northern Ireland, it would be in Northern Ireland, there would be 7 years between a border poll. Why can't that be the same in Scotland?
What she should be doing, rather than agitating for another referendum, is dealing with the very real issues in Scotland. And you talked about COVID. You know, there is a backlog in the Scottish National Health Service. I know that is a priority for the Scottish people, and that is what we should be talking about, and that is what the Scottish Government should be dealing with.
Well, one of our STV viewers, Gavin Strathern from East Kilbride, says, you changed your mind on Brexit. Why can't the people of Scotland change their minds on independence?
I respected the democratic will of the people when they voted to leave the European Union. I was somebody before the Brexit vote took place who was, you know, undecided, frankly, and I decided to stick with the status quo because I was worried about this disruption. Disruption didn't take place. I straight away got on with delivering the opportunities of Brexit, whether it was the trade deals, whether it was getting things done differently on sanctions, and I have done more than most ministers in the UK government to deliver the opportunities of Brexit. And what I am committed to doing is delivering for the Scottish fishing industry, delivering for our farmers in terms of new opportunities, and making sure we deliver on free ports in Scotland as well. So that is what I am focused on doing. I respected the result of the referendum. The issue we've got here is one of the parties who said that they were going to respect the result of the referendum, who said that it was a once-in-a-generation thing. Now, you know, a few years later are agitating.
One of your big supporters in this campaign, Jacob Rees-Mogg, described Douglas Ross as a lightweight. Do you agree with him?
I certainly don't. I think Douglas Ross is a fantastic leader of the Scottish Conservatives, and I'm proud that he's a friend and a colleague of mine, and I want to support him to knock spots off Nicola Sturgeon. I do.
And Douglas Ross thinks Boris Johnson misled Parliament and ultimately the people over Partygate. He's right, isn't he?
I don't agree that Boris Johnson misled Parliament. Boris did a great job as Prime Minister.
He really misled you.
He did. He delivered Brexit. He delivered the election result. He delivered on the vaccines. He's the only world leader with a street named after him in Kyiv because he backed, and a croissant as well, by the way,
the only
because
Prime
he
Minister
backed.
with a fixed penalty notice for breaking COVID rules, which everybody here, I'm sure, stood by.
I think he's the only Prime Minister that's actually been Prime Minister during COVID.
Well, but he's the only one with a fixed penalty notice for something like that, isn't he?
Colin, he's resigned. He's leaving the job. He's leaving the job.
And
you know, what's done is done.
And in the meantime, he's gone on holiday again. Is he right to have gone on holiday again, leaving the country without a Prime Minister effectively?
I think Boris Johnson is entitled to go on holiday. I think all of us are entitled to go on holiday, apart from candidates in this leadership election who are absolutely not
There is no
entitled
break for
to
you
go on
whatsoever,
holiday.
because we're now going to move on to our audience questions. And I'm going to start at the back this time, if you want to.
Yes,
it's entirely up
let's
to
do
you.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just do it so I can see people
So it's
better
more like
and
a
get
game show.
the colour of their hair wrong. Sorry about that. I'm going to start at the back this time. There's a gentleman up there on the left. Is there a microphone going to him sitting next to a woman in red? Near the front? Yes. And if you can put your hands up when you want me to come to you, I will try. I'll come to you next because you didn't get in the first round. Gentleman there first.
Hello, Liz. Thanks for coming to see us in Perth this evening. In Scotland, we have one functional nuclear power station. The SNP would like us to believe that they have the controlling power over whether we can have any further nuclear within Scotland. It's clear that we need it. How do we deliver it as a United Kingdom?
Well, I agree with you. We do need nuclear power. And I will always seek to work with the Scottish Government. I want to have a constructive relationship with the Scottish Government. But our priority has to be delivering for the Scottish people and for the United Kingdom. And that is the focus I will have. And I'm extremely supportive of making sure that we have more nuclear power alongside more gas from the North Sea and more renewables too.
How would you get around the planning permission situation with that? How would you get around the planning permission situation with that? Because there's no way you're going to get that past Scottish ministers, is there?
Well,
Can you bypass them?
I will use my arts of persuasion to get them on board.
Does that mean you're not going to ignore them then? You're not going to ignore them then?
Well, what I am going to ignore is these constant calls for a referendum. And there's, but no, let's be clear that I will work with Douglas Ross in a constructive way to help and support the people of Scotland. That is my priority.
Gentleman here.
Thank you. Good evening, Liz. Fantastic to see you up here. One of the questions I have is, when we talk about reversing taxes or bringing in tax cuts, when we looked at removing the red diesel there, it's had a knock-on effect, especially in local authorities where, with our refuse trucks, our equipment and civic sites are now having to pay full tax on that. Also the construction industry and new house building for local authorities. Is that something that would be considered?
Well, what I want to do is look at the tax system overall, because there are many ways in which our tax system doesn't work. It's too complicated, it's too convoluted, and in many cases it doesn't support business enough. So areas like business rates, for example, areas like duties, I think are too complicated. So I can't make any promises at this stage, but what I will do is have a thorough review of the tax system to make it simpler and fairer. And the key principle for me is that people who do work hard, people who set up their own businesses, people who, produce food, fishermen, these are the people we should be supporting, and we should be making sure the tax system doesn't penalise them.
Okay, quick question from the gentleman in the front.
Good evening, Ms Truss. Both candidates are saying about helping the pensioners, and I know that very shortly we're going to be calculating what the increase in the state pension is going to be. Under the previous government, under the previous Chancellor, there was a possibility of the pensions being increased by 8%, but he then re-looked at the figures and decided to increase the pensions by 3.5%. Are we going to use the highest level of increase, or are we just going to fudge the figures again?
I can tell you I won't fudge the figures. I'm fully committed to the triple lock, which gives the highest rate.
No. Thanks for coming to Scotland. You're welcome to Peoples anytime. What will you do to protect Scotland from this divisive and incompetent SNP administration and preserve the union? You've sort of answered it already, but I thought I'd like to hear it from yourself.
So, first of all, we need to make sure we are delivering for the people of Scotland on their priorities. Growing the economy, supporting investment, supporting jobs at this very, very difficult time, and making sure that issues like the energy supply issue are dealt with, because people will vote for us on the basis of whether or not we deliver. And I think that is absolutely important, and I am somebody who does deliver. I also want to work very closely with Douglas and his team in Holyrood, because I think it's very important that we support each other, and that the Cabinet are regularly talking to the shadow team in the Scottish Parliament, and we are able to get things done in that way as well. And that is the way that we can take on Nicola Sturgeon. It's by demonstrating that we're delivering as a UK government and pointing out, and Douglas and his team pointing out, the failings that we've seen. I mean, we've seen failings on everything from ferries to trains to roads to nuclear power to education, to health. The list is endless. But what we need to do is show we're delivering. So it can't be just about what the SNP isn't doing. It also has to be about what we are doing. And this is why I think things like delivering for the Scotch whisky industry is incredibly important. And it shows what having a committed UK government that talks to counterparts around the world, opening up opportunities, delivers for Scotland. So we need to carry on showing that we're delivering and how that is improving people's lives across this country.
Okay, there's a lady who's got out of her seat specially to ask you the question.
Liz, thanks for coming this evening. Both candidates have spoken this evening about supporting those that work hard and do the right thing. Appreciating that the Bank of England is independent from government, one thing that I have noticed is that the minute that interest rates go up by the Bank of England, it hits your mortgage or loan immediately, but doesn't hit your savings account. And I'm just wondering, what would your government do to make sure that those that are doing the right thing and saving feel the benefit of those interest rate rises?
Well, the answer is there's a lot more we need to do to drive competition in the financial services industry and make sure that banks and other investors or investment products are delivering for people. But it is a very important principle that the Bank of England is independent and it does set interest rates. And what we need to do is make sure the market is competitive so customers are seeing the benefits.
Gentleman there.
Liz, good to see you in the fair city. If you become Prime Minister, will you consider reinstating the 0.7% of GDP that we spend on overseas aid?
Well, the answer is that at present, it is not economically affordable. I will see what the position is, and when we are able to afford it, we will do it, and we're committed to that under legislation. But what I have done as Foreign Secretary is make sure that we're focusing our money on humanitarian aid. So we've put a lot of money into Ukraine to support the people who are suffering and struggling with food and with accommodation and shelter. We're also putting a lot of money into the Horn of Africa. And what we're doing is we're reducing the amount that we give to the multilateral organisations like the World Bank so that we can have more control over the spending and we can make sure it's going to those most in need.
Gentleman in the middle.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister.
Please don't get ahead of yourself. Please, don't let me get ahead of myself.
Okay, my question is about research and funding, something that both candidates have not mentioned at all in this leadership contest. So there's currently work going on about UK's association with the EU Horizon. So what are your plans to make sure there is an alternative for our scientists to be able to carry out our work, to continue to battle, to provide, to make sure that we're ready for future pandemics? Because I know a lot of people will agree with me, science did a lot of work to solve the problem of COVID. You need to give us more funding to do more work, to carry out more research, to cure diseases like cancer and diabetes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're right. Research, see a lot of researchers in the audience today. Research is incredibly important, and what I have been doing as Foreign Secretary is meeting with counterparts like the Swiss, the Israelis, the Japanese, to look at wider research networks the UK can be part of. Because, of course, we want to work with the EU on Horizon, but they are not the only show in town. And I think it's important that we build that wider international network. We are one of the world's best countries for research, particularly in areas like life sciences and physical sciences. And I'm determined that we build that wider international network so that we are able to share our expertise, have that collaboration, and really have a global reach. And that is the opportunity for Britain. Now we're no longer tied to specific schemes in the European Union. We really can develop with the best in the world.
Hi, Liz. This was actually a question for Rishi.
but Colin kept...
Don't worry, I'll answer it for
Colin
him.
kept
Don't worry,
ignoring
I'll be
me,
totally
so...
fair. I'll be totally fair.
Tonight we've heard a lot about trust and we've heard a lot about tax, and yet in government we broke election promises, and Rishi unfortunately was a serial tax riser. So can we trust on tax cuts?
The answer is yes. The answer is yes. I am somebody... I've always been a low-tax Conservative. In the Cabinet meeting where we discussed the national insurance rise, I was one of a few people who spoke out against it because I thought it was a bad idea at the time. I think it's even more difficult now that people are facing such hardship across the country. And also it's had a huge impact on businesses who have to pay extra national insurance as well. So I am completely committed to all of the tax plans I've laid out in this campaign. And every single promise I've made as a government minister, I have delivered. Whether it's on the trade deals, whether it's on dealing with the issue on the Northern Ireland Protocol, whether it's on sorting out the sanctions. And I will sort out our taxes. Well, now you're asking for even more. What I've said, what I've said is there will be an overall review of our tax system, and it is too complicated. You know, we have seen a lot of drift in terms of the levels of allowances. We will look at that. But what I want to make sure is that we have a very clear economic plan that grows the economy, because ultimately this country is going to be successful when we get business going, we back business, we see a faster growing private sector than the public sector. That's what I want to achieve.
There's a lady down here.
Hi Liz. I'm from Northern Ireland, was brought up there. I've been living on the mainland now for 20 years. I was home the other week and all my friends and family would like to know, are you going to get Sinn Féin and the DUP into government to get things done?
Nice hustings.
It is a warm-up, but the answer is yes, but we do need to resolve the issue with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Because at the moment, what the protocol is causing is it's causing a feeling of unfairness between the two communities in Northern Ireland, because it is very hard. And people, I know there are Scottish businesses who've stopped sending goods to Northern Ireland because of the bureaucracy and the paperwork. So we need to sort that out. We need to create the green and the red channel. And we also need to make sure that the people of Northern Ireland are able to benefit from the same tax rates as the people of Great Britain. It's understandable that people feel they're not being treated as part of the United Kingdom because of the way the Northern Ireland Protocol is operating. So this is why the Protocol Bill is important. I have been in talks with the DUP and they are supporting the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, and I expect to see things happening and the executive reforming.
Right, I'm going to try and squeeze two more in. There's a gentleman up the back and then there's a lady in the middle.
Good evening, Ms. Truss. You have talked a lot about the role of fracking could play in addressing the energy crisis. In light of the Scottish Government's position on fracking, how would you, as Prime Minister, persuade the SNP Green Scottish Government to change their mind?
Question almost.
Yeah, well, it's a similar question to the nuclear question. I do think the Scottish, the SNP Green government is on one hand they're saying people should have lower energy bills, and on the other hand they're refusing to back anything that will actually help deliver low energy bills. So, I will look at ways that we can persuade them that actually these are important ways of transitioning to net zero. But what we can't do when we're achieving net zero is to hammer consumers and hammer businesses in Scotland, because ultimately what it will mean is less revenue into the exchequer and less, fewer opportunities for the people of Scotland. So I will make that case.
Lady there with a brief question, isn't it? It is a brief question, isn't it?
Good evening. I think that in the early stages of this leadership election, Rishi had more parliamentary support than you did. will you, if you become the next Prime Minister, will you seek to unite the party by including Rishi and some of his leading colleagues in your cabinet, in leading positions?
Well, thank you. And I don't know if you're following, but I have gained quite a few parliamentary supporters in recent days, including, and I don't know if, including 11 members of the Whip's office who've come out in support of me today. But it is important that we unite the Conservative Party. We're all Conservatives. We all want to beat Nicola Sturgeon. We all want to beat Keir Starmer. And we all want to make sure Conservatives win here in Scotland, as well as right across the United Kingdom. So I will want to appoint a cabinet of all of the best talents from right across the Conservative Party, including Rishi Sunak, if I am successful in this leadership election. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you.
Great to see you.
Right.
Looking forward to our next interview.
Absolutely. Well, that pretty much is your lot. I've got as many questions as I possibly could from STV viewers, crucially from you in the audience tonight. If you'd show once again your appreciation to both candidates, please. A lot of you hadn't made up your minds before. Have you made them up now? So you're going home to vote. Some of you might even have been voting on your phones while that was going on, for all we know. But thank you all for taking part. Thank you all for your questions. Sorry if we didn't get them all in, but there was a limited space and a limited time. Thank you for STV viewers for watching online, and watch out for the result on September the 5th. Thank you.